Most people would have thought that Ashley was at the height of her life. She had a beautiful husband, a beautiful daughter, and a fantastic career as a criminologist. However, life took a turn, and in fact a number of turns, that nobody was expecting. Join me as Ashley and I start connecting the significance of the events that unfolded in their lives. Have you ever had one of those gut-wrenching moments where life ground you to your knees and you found yourself asking in despair, why me? This podcast is all about sharing your stories and journeys, from asking why me to declaring this is why me. Discover how ordinary human beings like you and I have found their extraordinary levels of hope, courage, compassion, and provided a new perspective for greater potential and self-empowerment during their darkest defining moment. As a creative artist and coach myself, my guests and I discuss the interconnectedness of emotion and transformation in those moments, and how their actions then seize the opportunity for discovering their unfiltered and authentic voice, and ultimately their life's purpose. I invite you to join me each week as we share insights into how adversity can be turned into a unique advantage. Today's guest is Dr. Ashley Wellman, who is a professor in criminal justice, creator of myfriendfresno.com, and the author of The Girl Who Dances with Skeletons, a children's book inspired by her daughter Reagan. If I may quote, "Sometimes our greatest friends are the ones we least expect. Just ask the girl who dances with skeletons and her friend Fresno. Join them as they learn that new things don't have to be scary. Our differences make us special, and that life is better when we are in it together." Welcome to the WhyMe podcast, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Vera-Lee. All right, so I'll start at the beginning of my adulthood, and then get to my why me moment, and we can kind of go from there. Like you said, I think the most powerful thing you said in the opening was that we all have that why me, and this feeling that life is just piling on top of us. And that was definitely where I found myself in the last 3 years or so. Has been really difficult. Actually, the last 5 years, last 2 have been beautiful, and I'll tell you about that. But I'm actually a criminologist, so I have my PhD in criminology, and I specialize in homicide and sexual assault. And so I am very, very driven since I got my PhD in 2011 to work with survivors, to be in the classroom, to be super successful as a scholar. And so that had been something that really consumed me as an adult. That was what I had worked so hard for. I was blessed because I had an amazing partner by my side that entire journey. Buddy was my husband. We met actually we went on our first date April 30th of 2010. And April 30th of 2011, we got married. Wow. And so it was really cool. I was just finishing my PhD, and I had told him, I've got to move somewhere around this country. I don't know where. You should not date me because you're going to have to uproot and move. And he's like, well, I'm ready to go along if you'll have me. Very sweet. And he was like that my entire career, because as an academic, you're very limited where you get to be. People think just go to university and apply like you would any other institution, but it's so hard to get a position, and you kind of go anywhere they'll take you. And so we made our way to Charleston. We made our way to Missouri. And while we were in Missouri in 2014, we had my daughter, Reagan. And we'll talk about Reagan later. She's the best. She's the best.
Gorgeous.
In 2016, Buddy and I were really naive. We thought baby 1 was so easy, so let's try for baby 2. And, we were very scientific, and we were ready to rock and roll. I suffered 4 miscarriages between 2016 and 2017.
Oh, no.
And it was devastating.
Yeah.
And Buddy and he was just so sweet and supportive, but I had really lost kind of who I was, because even as a mother, I wasn't confident being with Reagan anymore because of the losses of the babies. And then I was kind of angry because by time 4, the emotions had gone from
Yeah.
sad to tragic to, I was angry.
Yeah.
And so we made a very conscious decision that, maybe it'd be good for us to pick up, even though my career had been super successful where we were. I had gotten tenure, which is the holy, end all be all of academia.
Wow.
But I was so unhappy. We said, let's just move. And so we did. And in 2018, we came to Texas. That's where I am now. And I was starting a new job. It was many steps back from the job that I had had because you really can't transfer at a certain level once you move up. And so I had stepped way down. But this was this idea that my family was going to be better off for it. Sacrifices are just worth it sometimes. And so the day before I started my new job, we had only been in Texas about a month. I went upstairs to take a nap. My husband was snuggling my daughter on the couch, and I heard glass break. And I ran downstairs, and my husband had actually collapsed in our hallway. And I thought he was seizing. So I just didn't know what was happening. His body was shaking and he was trying to gasp for air. And my poor 4-year-old daughter has come around the corner and sees her dad on the floor. And all I know to do is just panic and call our emergency system, 911, and beg him to live. I mean, that's all I was doing, was just begging him to live. And the EMS, everybody came, they said he's okay because he has a heartbeat. And as long as a human keeps their heartbeat, right, we're okay. Well, then another fire truck comes and the police tell me, get back. And I'm begging them to tell me, does he have a heartbeat still? And one of them said he doesn't. And I had to follow them to the hospital. Thank God Reagan got to go with somebody else to their home. But I followed them to the hospital and I watched for 60 minutes. It was a total of 90 minutes. For 60 minutes in the emergency room, them tried to resuscitate him. And they got him back 4 times. Right. And every time I just thought, like, okay, we're going to be all right. And at 4:30 on August 12th, 2018, the doctor told me to stop screaming for him to live. And she said, he's brain dead and he's not coming back. And you need to stop. And so there I was, I'm standing in this emergency room, and everything in my life, right, changed in an instant. Of everything that had felt so important, every dream I had built, it just shattered.
Yeah. I'm not saying much because I'm very overcome. I can feel that grief still with that moment. That is something that sits with you for a long time. And I want to thank you. There I go.
I'm hugging you. Oh, no.
Well, I'm wanting to hug you because I want to thank you for being so open about that moment. That is, apart from everything that's happened there and everything that's literally shattered in your life around you, this was completely unexpected on top of it all.
Absolutely. And it was so graphic. And so I think that was one of the things that for so long, we struggled with because of the visualizations. And, when you go through trauma that has all these different components, these visceral components to it, it really does add to the trauma. And I think what's crazy and ironic is that I had studied grief and trauma surrounding violent death. Yeah. So my God, I wonder, what was God thinking when he's crafting this plan for me? But I actually started using a lot of those tools. And one of them was owning that story, so I'm appreciative of platforms like this to say, don't hide those things, right? Because I think the default for humans is that we don't want to make other people uncomfortable. And especially in America, I'm not sure how it is around the world elsewhere, but in America, grief is a taboo topic. Actually, I had gone back to work. I was so blessed. To get bereavement leave. And I have a really great group of colleagues, but when I got back, there was definitely a group that was very uncomfortable. If I cried, I was crazy. If I was happy, I was clearly, over my husband and didn't care. Right. And so there was so much judgment. And the job that I had moved for, there was this promise back to this successful path. I actually got blocked from getting it from a very small group of my peers. And then I have, right? I've had these miscarriages where I just go, wow, my definition of motherhood is gone. And my definition of motherhood got rocked when Buddy died, because now I'm a single mom, which I did
Yeah.
not want to be.
Yeah.
I was a widow. And then here I have this career that had been my end all be all, then gets thrown on me. So I remember nights when I would go, why, why me?
Yeah.
This has got to stop. And the scary answer to why me is, a lot of times if we don't process it, which I didn't for a while, I would make up reasons why me.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy enough. I'm not valuable enough. I did something wrong. I, shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. And so that's a tough question if you're not ready to really dig deep and figure out why.
Yeah, it is a very tough question, and for a number of reasons, as you've just alluded to there. And on top of that, there is an element of our decisions in our life that have brought us to certain points. And so there is an area in there that we have to touch of owning and being accountable for how we got into that position, even if the events themselves were out of our control. Still, everything that we'd done had led us to that point. And you bring up a very valid point of that lack of self-worth and the blame effect and all of that part of it. So it is definitely a journey to be able to acknowledge and reflect upon that side of it, but not to harbor shame, guilt, and have that stop you living your life now.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so thankful that if my story could help somebody kind of reclaim who they are. I always say, I'm transitioning into being a writer. And I'm like, really what I'm doing is rewriting my story, because if I don't write it, right, I listen to other people write it for me, or I let society dictate who I'm going to be defined as or what I should be. And I've learned that the word should is just bad in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
What could I be? Are these different things. And so I think giving yourself permission to say, when trauma hits and when tragedy hits and adversities hit, saying, look, life is not the same. And for me, everything was an ending, like not getting the babies and saying goodbye to Buddy and feeling like my career was gone. And I had to really stop. It wasn't until a couple of months ago that I said, you've got to be grateful for the chapters of what was entailed in that story, right? Because I don't like the endings, and there were really tragic endings, but I've learned so much, and I've gotten, like, I feel like I'm supposed to be right where I am right now. And I would not have been here without each and every turn of my life. And so I think it's finding a way in the midst of anger and grief and frustration to say, is there any way to turn this into a blessing? And that's kind of been my quest now, is making this magical life out of a pile of nothing.
Yeah. And I
for
love
my
that.
daughter and I
love that. And you touched on it earlier, that grief can be quite a taboo subject. And there's a number of reasons for that. In as you said, a lot of people don't like feeling comfortable. So when you bring up something that is obviously uncomfortable, both for yourself and the people who are going to hear it, and particularly if that is going to have them link into some experience that they've long buried. So there's a whole lot of unknowns there. There's also the fact that sometimes that grief is difficult to actually verbalize yourself, because you're still trying to process those strong emotions.
We don't know what's going on. So how, and it's difficult for other people to understand what's going on. I also think that there's such a misdirected guide, right? We have this beautiful grief guide that we can give people of, here's your stages, here's your journey. And then people have a finite capacity, or this limited capacity to say, I'm really comfortable in the weeds for the first month. But then, like, you start to see different things happen. And I think we're all that's the human condition, where it's like, oh my goodness, I'm getting uncomfortable. This is going on a really long time. And so, darn that little path that we tell people to take as far as grief goes, because it just doesn't work like that. And every journey is so unique and hard. And so I get it. It's very hard for anyone looking in to say, how would I handle this? Because for me, another widow is not going to grieve the same way I did.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, we don't know how we're going to respond to grief until it actually happens to us. And that response can change depending on the event as well and where we're at in our life. So it is not like, even for ourselves, once we've been through it once, that we know what the rule book is essentially for how to deal with it every other time.
Right. No, absolutely.
So I wanted to just reflect on something that I've seen as an instant pattern here. You had 4 miscarriages. Your husband was brought back 4 times, only to die another 4 times.
Oh,
And he died at 4:30.
what's the word for what's the number for mean?
I was going to ask you if there's any significance of the number 4 or
And
to
Reagan
you.
was 4, I was 34, Buddy was
Oh,
44.
what?
Vera, what does that mean? We have to look it up. What
We,
does the number 4 mean?
we need to Google it, and I don't have a
Oh
spare
my
screen to do it
gosh.
right now.
Okay, well, we
We'll,
will do it.
we will get back to that
We'll put
because
that in the show notes.
yeah, definitely. It was very significant to me as you were saying it. I'm like, 4, 4, 4, 4. Like
Oh my
I keep hearing
gosh.
4. Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm at my
Mm.
fourth institution. I mean, let's just keep
Mm.
it going.
Wow.
Oh
I think you
man.
need to note all these things down.
I think
Um,
so.
we'll have a little chat later, so we've got some time to Google and try and work through
Oh
this.
my
Hey.
goodness. Okay, well, I do not know. I hope it's good. I hope the
Yeah,
number 4 is
I'm
like it's
sure it will
building
be.
up to something really great. I'm going to have 4 successful children's books before
Yeah.
the next series starts.
Well, this is it. Whatever we come up with, it's for us to interpret. And like
That's
everything
exactly
in
right.
life, it's for us to choose how we respond. So if somebody told you a certain thing about, let's just go back to grief. Grief
Mm-hmm.
is going to feel like this. Just because one person said that doesn't mean it's true for you.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
means that it's true for them because that's what they experienced. What's
Yes.
true for you is what you experience. And so we always have that ability to integrate what is going on in our life and our environment into who we are and how we interpret that. And so, therefore, what becomes true for us.
That's so true. I think we want the rule book. And so we seek the rules. How should I be doing this? What am I supposed to feel? So that there's some kind of normalcy in the midst of chaos. And the reality is that, when you seek the advice, it's great, but you do get kind of these, it's like parenting, right?
Yep.
Where you ask one parent, should I be doing this? And they're like, oh, that's terrible. And another parent tells you that that's the best part of it. So I do think it's so difficult because you're in this broken state where you feel lost, and
Yeah.
yet you really do have to be the one to fight for not only yourself. I had to fight for a 4-year-old
Yes.
to get the help she needed and learn her ability to tell her story. So that was one of the greatest things that I was able to do, is get us into professional help. We had
Mm.
a children's grief home here where Reagan at 4 years old started to learn how to articulate what her experience had been with her father's death. And that started a very open line of communication
Right.
between she and I. And I would let her see me grieve and
Yeah.
struggle and celebrate, so that she
Yeah.
would know that those emotions and actions are acceptable whenever they happen to come up. And it's not always nicely packaged. Sometimes it's the moment you walk into the classroom, or right before I drop her off for school. And so, as nice as we would like it to be in this nice little ribbon and box, it just doesn't work like that. So just giving yourself grace and permission to fall and stumble, and then realize that it doesn't mean you're not on the right path. It just means it's a tough path.
It's a tough path, and you're human. And
Yeah.
this is what living life is about. It's about the ups and downs, and it's about the open line of communication that we have with our inner circle. And the more that we can encompass people in our outer circle and widen that, the more people are touched by that message, by that hope, by that courage. And it helps them to feel that and then apply that to their own struggles, that they perhaps then can feel, well, you know what, I do feel like I can now tell my story. I'd really like to talk about Fresno because now I don't know the background of Fresno. I've looked at your book. It is absolutely gorgeous. And
Thank you.
children and adults alike, I think everyone should check out your book. It is beautiful beyond words. The illustrations are gorgeous, and they add a beautiful mix of humor with this really deep concept that you're exploring in the book. I have in front of me at the moment the dinner table. He's a delightful dinner date. He lets me have his dessert and eats all my vegetables. And and then strange because he never gets full because the food's just going straight through and then the dog's eating it. I just love that. But before you tell me about Fresno and the book and your daughter, I would like to know, for me, when you were just talking then about that moment where in the hospital they told you to stop, my initial reaction to that was, oh, don't do that, because here you are in this situation. The last thing you need to be told is to stop all your emotions for what's happening. At the same time, I got this real visual that you were completely stripped back to almost nothing, which is what I consider a skeleton to be. So please enlighten us to the background and the story.
Well, that was very powerful. Mine is much, much more innocent and lighthearted. But you know what's funny is that as I look back on Fresno, I'm finding messages that relate so much to my story, and it's not my story; it's my daughter's story. So, when Reagan was 2, everyone remember I study murder.
Yes.
So my office has, and right around me actually are quite a lot of skeleton items. Halloween happens to be our favorite. But she was 2 years old, and we had gone to a local drugstore, and I had bought this posable skeleton. He's 3 feet tall. I had bought him, and I was taking him to my office.
Very cool.
she asked, could she put him in the seat belt next to her on, she was in her car seat. So she's like, you need to buckle him in, get him out of the bag. And I was like, all right, of course. So, I'm laughing and I'm looking at Buddy and I'm like, this is weird. And he's like, you're weird. It's let it be. Yeah. So I buckle him into the car. So we're riding the 4 of us in this car. And as I went to take him to work shortly after that, she said, you cannot take him. That's my best friend, Fresno. We've never been to, there's a Fresno here, we've never been to Fresno. And we thought, what? Okay. And I said, that's her friend. And we just started laughing. I said, enjoy it. So she would dance around the living room with Fresno. She would ask if she had to take a nap. She'd say, well, Fresno needs to get tucked into. And, I'd put her in the crib and I would put Fresno in a sleeping bag next to her. And then he would take baths with us. And I'd worry where Screw's going to get, rusty or what's going to happen. But poor Fresno got to do everything we did. And now Fresno gets in. Fresno has some duplicates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't tell anybody.
Right. Okay.
Reagan at first did not know, but there's a couple of Fresnos because one's lost an arm, one has a leg that's missing. So Fresno goes on all of our family vacations. He's been to Washington, Canada, all over the place. And so it's just really, really fun. And so in the midst of my grief, I had gotten bereavement leave. And it probably was not a month or 2 into bereavement leave that one of my dearest friends, he is still one of my dearest friends, walked in and he saw a picture of Reagan dancing with a skeleton when she was itty bitty. And he said, that is the most beautiful and bizarre picture I have ever seen. And he said, because there's so much artistic beauty in this little girl having no fear about something that the world around her thinks is scary. Right. And for her, he was just kind and he was a really good friend. He's like, write about that. Stop the writing, because I do a lot of research and scholarly writing on grief and trauma and sexual assault. He's like, drop that for a little bit and start writing about Fresno and Reagan and their friendship. And so the next morning I got in the car, but I got in the car and I pretended, I told myself, I'm going to be on the Ellen show and I'm going to dance out and I'm going to share this book with her because I'm going to write it and it's going to be successful and I'm going to make this happen. And so here I am, I'm like, probably one second I was crying. And then the next second I'm, doing my dance out moves so that I could share this book. And then I sat down and I wrote it. Love it. I started writing a teen novel about the Ghost of London and the Tower of London. And so as I was writing, it was in those moments, literally when my pen was hitting the paper, or I was voice recording a story into the phone, I would disappear from the darkness of my condo, I would disappear from the heaviness of the grief, and I would just dream for a second. And it was like you could take a paintbrush. I was not the illustrator. I'll tell you about him later. But it was like I was taking a paintbrush to my life again and finding these vibrant colors. I could hear things differently and see things differently. And so I would have these moments of grief. And then I would say, if I can get back to my creative process, I can kind of find life again. And so that's what I did. And Fresno started as such a genuine way to heal. And then as I started facing, career setback and, questioning who am I thought, well, you can be whatever you want to be. What if Ashley, the criminologist, is also Ashley, the author? And I build my own business and I share this message because the book is really about diversity, inclusion, self-love, and friendship. And I thought, and this is before everything went crazy, right? I thought, what a perfect message to share, especially with little ones, because to me, if we could start early, it's always been really important to me for Reagan to know and love people who don't look, act, think the same way that she does, and know that that's no threat to her, right? It just allows her to be more well-versed in humanity and love people, right? Regardless of what they think or act or, how they look. And then I guess when her father died, it became this way. Reagan's now forever different, like she doesn't have her daddy. And there's a lot of kids who don't have a parent. But at age 4, she's in a little classroom. It's very rare that little kids understand about losing a father or seeing your father pass away. And so I wanted a book to celebrate that being unique, good, bad, ugly, being unique, it makes you, and you are perfect and beautiful just the way you are. And so that's kind of the legacy of Fresno, and where I'm hoping this goes is that I can take me, the scholar, because that includes being a teacher and an advocate and those types of things, and put that towards something that to me makes so much more of a difference, reaching little ones and their families and giving them talking points to say, talk about your best friend who's different. Let's think about who's different in our life. And how are you unique? What are some things we've gone through that we do, that we, traditions we have, and being able to start vocalizing those, because it can be a tough conversation if it's uncomfortable. But the more comfortable these tough conversations become, then kids start growing up thinking like, I'm okay to talk about this and to embrace something that other people might think is scary. And that's exactly what Reagan did with Fresno.
I absolutely love that. That is the most beautiful way to celebrate who your daughter is and naturally who she is, and then also who you've both learned to become together after this tragic event. I'm going to come back to that stripping back moment, because to me, and this may not be in your consciousness, but to me, Fresno is very much a representation of what you've done yourself in stripping off all of your accolades and your career and everything, and getting to the bare bones of who you both are. We are perfect the way we are. We have gone through this and we're going through this together. And it doesn't matter everything that I've achieved to this point in my life. What it has done is it's given me the skills to be able to look at that different perspective.
Oh, Vera, I need your, this is going to be the outline of my memoir. It's going to be the bare bones of who I am. That's beautiful. You're absolutely right. I think for me, I told someone just the other day, the grief of my career loss almost felt more crippling than the loss of my partner, because it was what I felt was all I was at that point. And like you said, it really was. It was like each layer of my skin and then the muscles and everything just kept getting ripped out. And I think that took my heart away from me when that happened. And, and I sat there thinking, I don't know how to rebuild this. Like, how am I supposed to do this? And then, I had a great friend tell me, Ash, you get the power to do it, but you have to do it.
Yes.
And I thought, oh man, that's hard.
That's a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. And so I literally did. I walked down. I remember that conversation very well. I walked down to the courthouse, and here I am. I'm supposed to be this, important academic. And I'm going, I think I'm going to open my own business. Never done that in my life. I think I'm going to open my own business. I think I'm going to stop horsing around with this book, and I'm going to make it something that is a way for my daughter and I to thrive. I got teamed up with Zachary Thomas Kincaid, Zach Kincaid. I'm not sure about in Australia, but Thomas Kincaid is his uncle, the painter of light, a phenomenal artist. But Zach is, and like you said, you saw the pictures. It's so good.
Yes,
it's so good. And
it is.
Anyone who's starting a project, I will tell you this. This was another hard lesson. How long these projects take, and how if you'll trust the process of I want X, Y, and Z, and saying it doesn't have to be today, and it doesn't have to be accepted by everyone around me, right? Because they'll come around. It will get done if I start the process, right? So I remember those grueling baby steps of saying, okay, I want the book now. It's written. Why don't I have a book right now? And then saying, don't do that. Celebrate. There's so many milestones from here to having that book in your hand that we can rejoice in, and you can learn it. And you like, I remember a couple setbacks even in getting it published and things like that. In those moments, I actually corrected things, made ancillary products, so a stuffed animal and puzzles. And so sometimes those little setbacks or hiccups or the fear, that can actually be what makes it even more successful. So
that's right. There's the opportunity. Yeah. And look, that's what the WhyMe Movement and the WhyMe podcast is about. It's about talking with people who've been through really tough stuff, and somehow at some point, and it doesn't always happen straight away. In fact, it usually doesn't happen straight away. But at some point in that journey of the ups and the downs and the ebbs and flows, you will see a door open. You will see a light come in onto one aspect where you go, oh, now I can take this from that. And sometimes there are lots of lessons. Sometimes there's one lesson. It is actually relevant about the number of lessons. It's about seeing the opportunity at all. And as you keep saying, trusting the process.
Yeah, for me, it really was about saying, is there a way to find beauty in this? And then I had to stop and say, you know what? One of the beauties is I have Buddy's daughter. I have our daughter, and so, yes, I don't have my partner, but can you imagine a life where I didn't have him because I wouldn't have my daughter? And this career setback, I have such a rich, beautiful history in my career with the survivors of homicide and sexual assault. And they're some of the bravest, strongest people I know that were in my life for a very divine purpose. And they developed that advocacy heart in me. I have students that are still like children to me, are, best friends with me, colleagues that are best friends with me. So all of it, my miscarriages even, I can't tell you how many friends I had miscarry before I had, that I was the one who would say things that like, oh, well, it's God's plan, or don't worry, you can get pregnant again. And then I did it. I had 4 miscarriages. And now the grace and understanding and support I can provide to people that I love so dearly, who we don't talk about miscarriages very much, because people do shun and shut that down of, well, was it a baby, and these different things. And knowing that so intimately, that's kind of what started me being able to speak, was saying that there's so many people who reached out to me when I shared my story about my miscarriages, saying, oh, I've had 4, I've had 2, I've had 3, I've never told anybody. And I thought, the shame and heaviness and the grief that you carry with that, and you couldn't tell someone. So all of the bad, right? And sometimes it's a lot easier, and some days I can't feel the beauty.
Yeah.
So that's transparent, right? Some days it's not beautiful. I'm angry or frustrated. But I really do say, whoa, looking back, every single thing I've been able to accomplish in my life is because of the good and the bad. And that's kind of what's guided me. And so now, I have a guardian angel who gets to watch from the sidelines, but I have people in my life now and opportunities. I wouldn't be doing podcasts and doing this and writing children's books and believing in myself the way that I do if I hadn't been forced to be that skeleton and then start adding the layers back on. I had to rebuild who I was, and I really like her. Yeah. And that was scary because I put on many sheets I didn't like.
Yeah.
But
I'm
you start building the person you like again.
that's exactly right. You do.
Mm.
And I'm going to share with you something here. And again, I'm bringing up Fresno. Fresno is my new best friend.
I can't wait. Oh my gosh, I love this now.
Again, the process of recovering from any trauma or any grief. Now, my background is I did suffer many sexual assaults at the hands of my husband. So I've been through that process. I've learned how, or I did learn at the time, how to disassociate from my physical body so that I could survive until I was ready to process what had happened in a safe space. So I've gone through that process. And we were talking a little bit about my art earlier. The process that I go through, my creative process in creating artwork, is to take a photograph, and I will usually take it specifically for the piece of art that I've conceptualized in my head. Bear in mind that the end result will never be the same as what I originally think, and that's a good thing. So I will take a photograph for shape, for pattern, for color, for light, for shadow, and then I will strip it back. And I use these words all the time. I will strip it back to its bare bones. There's my Fresno. And then I layer back in purposefully everything that needs to go in.
Wow.
And I
This is a good therapy session for both of us. First of all, before we go any further, thank you for sharing that with
You're
me.
welcome.
And I'm so sorry that you experienced that, but my God, the platform you have built to help fellow men and women who are survivors, that is the best word to describe someone who's experienced something so horrific, a true survivor, and the strength and courage. Thank you for sharing it, because you are one of the people that gives voices to people who need it so badly. So thank you.
During the interview, I described a process of how I create my photographic artworks. I offer this service to my clients to create exclusive pieces of artwork designed around your story and about you and your defining moment. If you would like to know more information about how you can have a piece of artwork created where every day you pass it in your home, you are reminded of where you came from, how you got through that transformative experience, and that your inner warrior is still there, even on the days when you don't recognize him or her, even on the days where you don't feel quite up to dealing with the world. You've done this before. You've got this. This is my premium service that I provide my clients, and if you would like the opportunity to discover this process and experience with myself, you can contact me through WhyMeMovement.com for more information. You're most welcome, and that is why I'm doing what I do.
Amen.
And it is also the understanding that adversity comes in many shapes, forms, sizes, times in our life, and it's not about one being worse than the other. And you mentioned before, losing your career almost felt worse than losing your husband. Now, some people would not voice that, Ashley, because they would be afraid of the judgment that other people are going to say, well, how could you possibly say that? You're talking about a career, and then you're talking about your husband's life. But I get it.
For me, there was such beauty in that chapter for me with Buddy. And so when I was able to kiss him goodbye, because I got to see him before I got cremated, I got to kiss him goodbye. I actually put the pictures of our sonograms where we had miscarried babies. And I said, look, I'm grieving the loss of you now. That is a burden I never thought I could carry. I'm going to leave the babies with you. And I hope you can meet them in heaven and be their dad, because we wanted them so badly. And I said, so you take them and let me grieve you, and I'm going to take care of your baby. That's enough for me to have to do. And so there was such love there, and it was so beautiful. So it was like, as sad as I was that my best friend wasn't there, there's not a day that my love with Buddy and that my partnership with Buddy is not just this just colorful prism of beauty that I'm like, I got loved so fearlessly. I got the most beautiful daughter. He was such a good dad. Like, there's just, everything's good. I don't have regrets. I wish I had said this. And not everyone can say that.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people say like, oh my God, they died and now I have all this. I had no guilt with that man. And now I'm just like, I can even laugh and be like, I hope you're having a good bourbon up there. I hope you're
Yeah.
having pizza today, So like I use that moment. I wish I could erase and break into a million pieces and I would do anything to get him back. But that whole chapter of my life is beautiful. And I'm finding purpose in the love he gave me and the confidence he gave me. So it's always been beautiful. He's
Yeah.
always been beautiful. So the loss of him, as tragic as heartbreaking as it was, I still got him and I could fearlessly hold on to that.
Yeah.
With my job, I was like, I was literally imagine poor Fresno with just like one arm of skin left, and I'm
Yeah.
going, I don't know who I am, but I know I'm a damn good professor. So this
Yeah.
is what I'm going to do. And then when that got pulled off, I think because I was already so vulnerable, I had
Yeah.
already been so vulnerable with the miscarriages. And then my best friend, my husband, the love of my life, the father to my daughter, dies in front of me. So the trauma of that and not having him. And then my job, I think I was so raw and so broken that felt like I could rebuild through my career. And when that got stripped away, I really was sitting there just raw.
Yeah.
And so I think all of it, as I just remember being so proud of myself and the progress I had made of like, oh my God, a year after he died, I'm going up for this job that I promised I was going to get for us. And it was also the last promise that we had made 3 plans in Texas for the like
Right.
short term. And it was get my daughter in this performing arts school. I did that, right? Get us a house. I did that. And then I was going to get this job. And so I think I also held this piece of me that's like I had failed in some way and I had failed him in
Mm.
some way and I couldn't fix it. Like there was no way to fix it.
Mm.
So that's where, that's how it was just bad. And then I said, well, you know what? This career has given me every tool I need to be anything I want. And if I want to stay put where I am and continue at the position I'm at, I can. But for me, it was about maybe that chapter is also closing. And that's just that pain I needed to say, look a different direction.
Yeah.
And so I can almost say, well, thank you for that because,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. In hindsight, sometimes we connect those dots and in a good way that we don't at the time when we're in the thick of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And that's where adversity of whatever form it's going to come at us in, the way that we respond to it is very dependent on where we're at in our life at that time. So had that news come at a different time, it might not have felt the impact as much as at that moment because, as you said, you had lost. You'd lost so much. And here you were trying to add back in, and then you lost that last part that you'd kept as your identity.
Yeah. And it really was more about I had lost myself. It
Yeah.
wasn't the career, it was that
Yeah.
last piece of self. And so, oh man, it was not good. It was
Yeah.
not a good couple of months.
Yeah. Well, good thing your Fresno was nice and strong. The foundation
Amen.
was there. And then
Amen.
you could start layering back in, which is a beautiful thing.
I think the little girl who stood beside Fresno helped a heck of a lot too.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on that too. Reagan's creativity and obvious, natural creativity in adopting Fresno into the family is just beautiful. And I was so happy to hear you talking about both of you saying, let's just go with this. This is great.
Yes. Reagan tells me all the time, she says, Mom, if anyone deserves to be happy, it's you. Let's do this, and she'll take with Fresno. She's been so funny because she'll tell people in the store, oh, like we're writing a children's book. You should follow us on social media.
Oh, yeah.
Or she'll get in on the little Facebook videos or TikTok videos or whatever we're doing. And so it's been fun for both of us. And she really is. She's just a little star, whether that really means as a performer or not. She's just special.
Yeah.
There's something very wise about her too. And what's cool is it's not the artistic part because that's me. But sometimes when we're going to bed, she'll say things to me that I think are a 46-year-old man now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Saying through her. And it's the most precious, wise statements of like, Mom, it's okay that you're not perfect. you are perfect the way you are. And I'm like, what is happening? So
Yeah.
she and I just have this really magical bond because of what we've been through. And Fresno has been nothing but excitement for us. Even on the days where I panic because something's not perfect. As an artist, I feel like it's this dual mind of, create anything you want and then it doesn't look,
Yes.
it's not good enough. It's never
Yes.
good enough. And so I remember her laughing. She's like, I love it. And I think other kids are going to love it, And so any nitpicking I do, she's like, stop it, mom. And so she's 6 and she encourages me and she's my best cheerleader, just like I hope I am for her.
It's so beautiful. And I relate to so much of that with my own son. I too was not expecting to be a single parent, and
Mm-hmm.
I left my husband when my son was about
So
five or
proud
six
of
months
you.
old.
I'm so proud
Yeah,
of you.
yeah, and it was not easy. And
Mm-hmm.
going through everything I went through at that time, it was really hard. Yet he was there throughout the lot as the little trooper that he was and still is. And he's nearly 18. He turns 18 very soon. And I look at him every day and I think, wow, this young man, which is what he is now,
Mm-hmm.
is so articulate. He's an amazing human being. He's so much my son in his little idiosyncrasies and the way that he thinks and his sense of humor. We have some aspects the same, some that are different that I'm learning to learn what his sense of humor is. I just love this journey of parenthood with him. It
Oh, it's
is
cool.
so
It's
cool.
cool. It's not always easy. Let's
No,
all parents listening right now, all mamas listening. It's not always pretty. I lose my
no,
temper. We have our moments, but I look at her in awe of
yeah,
that's my baby. We made that baby, and what a beautiful human she's
yeah,
becoming. It's just it's great, and I think particularly in today's age, like what a great partner your son's going to be to somebody because
yeah,
of the bond you two have and like the honesty and trust and understanding he has. And for Reagan, I think she's so much of a beautiful person because of, not in
yes,
spite of. Like I hate when people go, oh, I'm doing this in spite of the trauma. No, I'm not. I'm doing it because of the trauma and with that trauma, and I'm not burying that because it's part of who I am. And
yeah.
but I'm doing this because of, and with that, with that adversity, right? It's coming with it.
That's
So
it.
mhm.
It becomes part of how you integrate into who you are. It's your experiences. And you want to stay in touch with those experiences without letting the sad and grieving part continue impacting your future life. So it's about getting that balance where you can say, you know what, this did happen to me. I'm okay with it now because of all of these good things that I've been able to get from it, all the lessons, all the way that I'm now doing this, this, and this in my life that I would never have done had that experience not happened. And that's the way that I find most people get the inspiration in listening to stories like yours being shared, in that they can relate to some aspect of it and say, you know what, there is hope. It is possible to make something out of this mess. And in a group that I'm in online, we often talk about, turning the mess into beauty. And that is
Oh,
something that, again, I've always done with my artwork. My most prolific time and my most impactful pieces of artwork to me were the ones when I was in my deepest, darkest moments.
mhm.
And looking at them now, I still have that connection, but I don't feel an absolute mess when I look at it. I don't sit there and cry hysterically on the floor for a couple of hours and can't get up and have a
Yes.
migraine for 3 days,
Yes.
like
Yes.
it's
It
that
really is.
moving
It's
through.
crippling. And
Yeah.
then you go, wait a minute. Now it's part of my story. And it is. And it
Yes.
takes it takes a fight to get to that. And it's okay that there's some days that I guarantee you probably do have emotions that go like, whoa, I
Yeah.
didn't expect that. Because I think with trauma comes those unexpected moments where
Yeah.
it peeks its way through. But it really is who we are, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember fighting where someone, one of the most hurtful things said to me after Buddy died was, well, you're not the woman that we fell in love with anymore. And I remember how devastating that was. And now it's almost a badge of honor, that I'm
Mm.
like, yeah, you know what? I'm not. I am,
Yeah.
I'm her, but I'm so much more now because of what
Yeah.
I've gone through. And so, I mean, again, maybe that really hurtful moment, I've used it to say, wait a minute, it's okay that I'm not that. My life changed. And so I'm allowed to change. And I think as humans, we don't give ourselves that permission. We get used to that tradition and routine and schedule. And while that can be super comfortable, it also keeps us chained to things that aren't healthy for us, that make us miserable. And so when that was said to me, I fought it for so long. I was like, how dare them say that? And then I went, wait a minute, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm actually the author and small business owner and,
Yeah.
braver and stronger than I ever knew I was. So yeah, it's it's all right to change and bend.
It is all right. And as you just so eloquently explained, it is perfectly acceptable and, in fact, a good thing to be able to look at the same situation from a different perspective and
Mm-hmm.
create something from that rather than letting something destroy you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
being
so
on my
much.
show. Now, Ashley, how can people get in contact with you and get a copy of your amazing book?
I would love for your listeners to follow our adventures. We actually, for our international fans, I am in the United States. For our international fans, I have the ebook version of My Friend Fresno that's available for instant download on the website, www.myfriendfresno.com. And they can also follow our adventures on social media at My Friend Fresno.
Fantastic. And it's the ebook that I was looking at, which again, I'm going to say it again, it was absolutely gorgeous in so many ways and on so many levels. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you. Of course. Thank you.
And I will make sure I put those links in the show notes as well. Ashley and I stayed talking for at least another hour about all sorts of things, funerals, the significance of the number 4. We did Google what we found, and it was very telling, and it fit with everything that we'd been talking about and the dots we'd been connecting during that podcast interview. I have re-listened to the rest of that discussion we had, and if enough people want to message me asking to see it, we might decide to put that up at a later point as a bit of a bonus episode. It is as entertaining and heartfelt as the interview that you just heard.